This is the fourth in a series of 6 videos on why the theory of evolution is a religious theory. Now, in the first 3 videos, we looked at the religion behind evolution. Now we're going to switch gears to the science, because one of the rebuttals that evolutionists make is that, okay, whatever, maybe Charles Darwin did make religious arguments. Maybe those religious arguments were important. Maybe he did have a religious axe to grind. So what? None of that really matters, because Darwin had the goods. He had the scientific, the empirical science behind him. He had the scientific arguments and the scientific evidences that were compelling, that were epistemologically sufficient to advance his theory. They made the theory compelling. Now, not surprisingly, you'll see that sort of a claim in textbooks often enough. That's kind of routine in textbooks. But it's also common and routine and the consensus position in contemporary scholarship. Philosophers and historians routinely make this sort of a claim, that Darwin proved, demonstrated, showed that natural selection and common descent were true, that evolution is a compelling theory. Let me read to you a couple of examples. John Hedley Brooke wrote, "Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection showed how nature could counterfeit design, giving rise to new and well-adapted species having all the appearance of design." Robert Richards wrote that in The Origin, Darwin made the truth of natural selection obvious. Now, I could read to you many more examples like that, but you get the point. Contemporary scholarship, people, researchers and scholars who are in the Darwin industry, who have studied the details of evolution and Charles Darwin, hold to this position, that Darwin basically proved evolution. Maybe he didn't have all the details. Of course, he didn't have all the science that we have today. But at that time, he proved evolutionary theory to be true via common descent and natural selection. What about that claim? Well, again, it's not true. You can look at this Origin of Species and read through here, and you won't find it. It just is not there. It's a false claim. It is not true. There is no demonstration, no proof. He doesn't make it compelling. The theory of evolution by natural selection and common descent is not here. But you don't have to take my word for it. Readers at the time did not find it. Readers at the time were skeptical of natural selection and common descent. In fact, friends and supporters of Darwin were skeptical of natural selection. Natural selection was controversial. It was not proven or demonstrated in the volume. In fact, there was one more person who was not all that sure about natural selection and had some doubts about that. A very important person. Who was that? Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, in his book of Origins, was backpedaling. Let me give you some examples of what he wrote in The Origin. First of all, on the evolution of the eye, Darwin wrote, "I have felt the difficulty far too keenly to be surprised at any degree of hesitation in extending the principle of natural selection to such startling lengths." In other words, Darwin wasn't too sure about the evolution of the eye via natural selection. There were other examples throughout the volume as well. Darwin talked about natural selection throughout the volume, of course. Here's another example. It's serial homologies. Darwin wrote, "On the theory of natural selection, we can satisfactorily answer these questions." So that's not a very strong claim. We can satisfactorily answer these questions. Darwin did a lot of writing, and for that, was that his conclusion? Well, in fact, Darwin downgraded that by the time he got to the 6th edition. He wrote, "On the theory of natural selection, we can, to a certain extent, answer these questions." So he was backpedaling. He was going in the wrong direction. Now, what about common descent? Well, it was the same story. In fact, at the end of the book, Darwin gives his summary defense, his summary arguments for common descent. He gave 5 different pieces of evidence or categories of evidence for common descent. Well, again, they were all weak. They were all problematic, in fact. You can read the paper, the link is down below, that goes into the details, but it was a weak story. And in fact, Darwin himself, by the time he was through, admitted that universal common descent probably wasn't true. He was arguing for maybe we could whittle it down to 10 common ancestors or something on the order of 10 common ancestors for the animals and the plants. Darwin himself was backpedaling from universal common descent. Darwin admitted to multiple origins. Here's what he wrote. Quote, "I believe that animals are descended from at most only 4 or 5 progenitors, and plants from an equal or lesser number." So Darwin had dropped universal common descent. So is it true, this rebuttal that we're looking at in this video, is it true that Darwin had the epistemological sufficient evidence and arguments, the scientific goods, the hard science, where he demonstrated, he proved, he showed evolution by natural selection and common descent to have happened? No, not at all. Not at all. The science wasn't there. In fact, for most of the volume, he was backpedaling or apologizing, showing how, well, it doesn't disprove my theory. But he had the strong arguments from religion, as we looked at in the previous videos. Religion drives science, and it matters.